Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 16th of September of 2023. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And today we will try to analyze the data, the information that we received according to the Ministry of Defense report, because today they provided us another weekly report. They gave us new summary regarding the previous week, and it is very interesting because I have compared the numbers for this week that have just ended today and the previous week, and we have a lot of very interesting differences that I would like to discuss with you. And first we're going to start with Kherson direction. As you can see, as of today we haven't received even a single video geolocated from this area. That means that it doesn't mean that there were no clashes or something like this, but probably the intensifying of clashes was reduced for some reason. The Ministry of Defense reported that the only thing important about Kherson direction is that on the 11th of September, the Russians made missile strike upon the Kryvyi Rog, the settlement on the north of Kherson in Dnipropetrovsk region, and as a result of that strike, the Ukrainians lost 2 MiG-29 and 3 Su-25 aircraft. So this is a very good result. But as you can see, according to this information, the Russians haven't destroyed Su-24, the most dangerous aircraft that Ukrainians have, those aircrafts that can attack the Russians, who can carry and attack the Russians with Storm Shadow missiles. Now let's talk about report. According to the previous weekly report, the Russians reported that total losses on Kherson direction of Ukrainian forces were around 355 soldiers. And during the previous week, the Ukrainians lost 360 soldiers, so just 5 soldiers more. So that means that nothing changed, and nothing has changed in this direction. So the same activities, the same intensifying, and the same things that happened 2 weeks ago, the same thing happened during the previous week. So no changes, and this is very important. Now we are moving further to Zaporizhzhia direction, and the important and interesting things starts from this area. First of all, let's talk about important geolocations that we got today, and probably the most important geolocation that we got is the situation on the western part of Robotyne. According to this video, according to the author of this video, he claims that the Russians were bombing and attacking the Ukrainian positions along the tree lines that goes from Robotyne in direction of Kopany. So that means that Ukrainians, after they managed to establish control over Robotyne, over part of Robotyne, over entire Robotyne, after a small operational post, the Ukrainians started their movement to the west, trying to develop their positions, trying to move further to Kopany, and the most important, trying to secure the only supply support road that goes from Orekhov Novodanilovka in direction to the south. It is a vital question for them because during the previous days, we got a lot of geolocated videos how the Russians were bombing and attacking the Ukrainian supply road, and that Ukrainians had and still have a lot of losses during the movement from Novodanilovka from the north. Let's add this supply road one more time from this area to the south. Significant losses, and for example, today we got another video how FPV drones of Bobry squad discovered another Ukrainian light vehicle, and as a result of FPV drone hit, that light vehicle was destroyed. It's not like it wasn't like Bradley or Striker, but it was a light car that Ukrainians were using probably for evacuation of wounded soldiers, more maybe to bring in some ammunition. So any type of vehicle is a very big losses for the Ukrainians. So basically, according to information we have, currently the Ukrainians are trying to attack further to the west in direction of Kopany, and that they have already established control over some tree lines. Currently I'm not updating the map because we need more days to understand what is going on. The Russians, to slow down the Ukrainians, at least for somehow, try to attack. They continue attacking and bombing the settlement itself, because anyway, even if you're going to attack along the tree lines, you need to attack and to do this through the settlement. So that's why the Russians continue bombing and attacking Robotyne with TOS flamethrower systems with different types of weapon, and as we can see, probably the result is very big. Another interesting geolocation we got from the east of Robotyne, to be more precise, from the western part of Verbova in this direction. According to the author of this video, the Russian author claims that on this video we can see the movement of Ukrainian infantry, of Ukrainian troopers, storm assault forces, who was moving along the tree lines, and basically they were trying to storm and assault the Russian positions, and probably they managed to clear this territory. So according to this geolocation, we can know for sure, and we can understand just one thing, that Ukrainians have captured the final tree line, and as a result of currently the Ukrainians located in front of the Verbova settlement itself, and there is no problem to start real offensive operation, because there are no more barriers in front of them. Furthermore, right before I start making this video, we got very interesting update that the Ukrainians have already launched a small offensive operation. Probably that was a reconnaissance in force or in combat. For those purposes, the Ukrainians were in 3 assault squads, 3 assault platoons, but the Russians managed to repel those attacks, and furthermore they managed to capture up to 8 Ukrainian soldiers. When talking about the southern, let's finish with this eastern direction, Verbova direction. As we discussed, for any upcoming offensive operation in this direction, the Ukrainians tried to accumulate their forces during the previous week exactly in this square, and mainly the Ukrainians were trying to accumulate the forces of 82nd Air Assault Brigade and the forces of 71st Jaeger Brigade. But the thing is that the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation also reported that during the previous weeks, the Ukrainians' 82nd Air Assault Brigade lost its combat capabilities, and currently the Ukrainians are trying to evacuate the entire brigade, or the parts, those that left from that brigade, to the mainland for restoring its combat capabilities. So we will wait a little bit more, and if this information confirms, we will remove 82nd Brigade from this direction, but yet we will still keep this brigade in this direction. Furthermore, we continue receiving updates from the 46th Air Mobile Brigade that currently tried to concentrate their forces in the southern salient, and we got a lot of videos how the Ukrainian forces were bombing and attacking the Russian forces along this defense belt. We're using this video just for learning purposes to geolocate the real combat line, and according to this video we see that the Russian positions located along this, this map shows the real and correct Russian positions. Another video a little bit to the south of to the east of 46th Brigade, to the south of location of 82nd. The same situation, the Ukrainians were attacking and bombing the Russian trenches, which confirms that these territories at least under Russian control. So another important thing about Zaporizhzhia, according to the Ministry of Defense report, when talking about this week, the Ukrainians lost during all these attacks, all these clashes, all these attempts to capture the Russian positions and so on. The Ukrainians lost around 740 soldiers. So a very big number. They lost around 40 armored vehicles and 38 artillery systems. If we compare these numbers with the previous weeks, with the previous weekly report, the Russians reported that the last time the Ukrainians lost 845 soldiers. So basically, we see that Ukrainian losses reduced for 100 soldiers, and this is a very important thing. And the question is, what is the reason of such a reduction of losses? First of all, from one side, this might be the reduce of Ukrainian activity, because basically during the previous week the Ukrainians have captured Robotyne, managed to get the outskirts of Verbova, managed to establish their foothold between Novoprokopovka and Verbova, and basically they complete everything they needed before the next phase. And after that they started concentration of forces, and during this week the Ukrainians mainly were concentrating the forces, and just by the end of this week they start making some attacks in direction of, let's say, Verbova and to the west of Robotyne. Maybe this is the reason. But from the other side, there is a very high chances that Ukrainians also managed to learn something new and to improve their tactical characteristics. And this is completely different development of the situation, and this is a very important question we have, and we need to find an answer. Whether the Ukrainians reduce their activity, so what was the reason why the losses is during this week less in comparison with the previous, whether the Ukrainians improved their tactical characteristics, or they stopped or reduced their activity. And I believe that during this video we're going to find the answer to this question. Now we're moving further to the Vremivka tactical bridgehead to south of Zaporizhzhia area. Today we also almost haven't received nothing from this direction, just few videos, few updates. Today there was a very interesting video of 20 minutes video how the Ukrainians were trying to storm the Russian trenches along this tree line. That attack was repelled by the Russian forces, so the most important thing from that video is that Ukrainians were using up to a small platoon up to 20 soldiers, and they were attacking one stronghold where there were just around 2 or 3 Russian soldiers. And the thing is that during that battle nobody died, and neither the Russian soldiers nor the Ukrainians. And after the Ukrainians, let's say, used their munition, they took a decision to step back and just left the trenches. So another thing that the question is why the level of loss of the Ukrainians have been reduced, whether it's like the reduce of activity or the improvement of Ukrainian skills. Very important question. And the Minister of Defense, for example, reported that if we compare the level of losses of the Ukrainians during this week and the previous, for the previous week, the Ukrainians lost 1,230 soldiers, and during the previous week, the Ukrainians lost 1,100 soldiers. So as you can see, the level of losses also have been reduced for another 10%, and we see that Zaporizhzhia and South Donetsk area, the level of loss of the Ukrainians have been reduced for around 10%. But when talking, of course, Zaporizhzhia area, the clashes, the actions, there was less activity in this area. But when talking about South Donetsk direction, we remember that during the previous week, this week, the Ukrainians made at least few attempts to attack in the direction of Novomayorska and from Zolotaya Niva and Novodonetsk, and there were very heavy clashes, very heavy battle in this area. And we see that something wrong with this, like why the level of losses is less in comparison with the previous week when the Ukrainians didn't have any activity in this direction. Now we are moving further to Donetsk area. Today we got some geolocated videos how the Russians were bombing and attacking the Ukrainian positions on the north of Novomikhailivka, on the south of Marinka. As you can see, this is Zverina's stronghold. This is the title of this stronghold, and as I understand, as a result of some counter-offensive operation, the Ukrainians managed to return control over this area one more time. And now the Russians try to bomb and attack the Ukrainians and to prepare the way to start the Russian counterattack. So this is the stronghold that changed its owner just for this year, maybe 10 or 20 times. Now we are moving further to the most important probably area, to Artyomov's direction. Before start talking about Artyomovsk, let's one more time discuss the report of Ministry of Defense. The Russians reported that during this week the Ukrainians lost 1,700 soldiers during this week, and during the previous week the Ukrainians lost 2,100 soldiers. So basically the Ukrainians lost for 400 soldiers less this week in comparison with the previous, so less for 1 battalion, and this is a very important progress. It's a very big progress. And one more time, the question is whether it's just the Ukrainians had less activities, less offensive operations, and so on, or maybe they have improved their tactical skills or something like this. Because when talking about Donetsk direction, the Ukrainians made a lot of attempts to attack in direction of Andreevka, and today the Ukrainian soldiers published the video of how they were storming and clearing the settlement, which confirms that the Ukrainians, as a result of very fierce clashes and battles, managed to capture the ruins and to get some prisoners of war. Later we got another video from another angle, how from the first person view, have the video how the Ukrainians were clearing the settlement as well, which confirms that this area is under Ukrainian control. I have updated the map. For now I have removed just the Russian color from this territory. If tomorrow or during the upcoming night the Russians are not going to launch any counter-offensive operation, then tomorrow we will color entire area into the yellow color. And this is the situation, at least on the southern flank of Bakhmut. The Russians, for example, today also published few videos from the northern part of Klishchiivka, which also confirms some partial control over this territory. But when talking about this video, we see that the Russian soldiers are trying to retreat, and basically they withdraw their position and they try to cross the railways and to move in direction of Bakhmut, which also can mean that the Russians completely left this bank of, let's say, of railways, and currently the western part of the railways is under complete Ukrainian control, without, of course, Bakhmut and the settlements like Kurdyumovka and Azaryanovka. And now let's try to analyze what is going to be next. Obviously, if you ask my opinion, I don't think that Ukrainians have time to continue their offensive operation. Let's say they don't have time, manpower to cross the railways and to continue offensive operation in direction of Adradovka, let's say in direction of Mykolaievka Drugaya, or even more in direction of Opytne. I assume that the Ukrainians are planning to, at least before winter comes, to establish full control and the combat line along the railways. This is exactly what they need to secure their positions and to prepare their and to complete preparation before the next year offensive operation that probably will take place. And just the next year, the Ukrainians will try to continue their offensive operation and to, let's say, encircle Bakhmut from the south. Why the Ukrainians are not going to continue further? Because basically they don't have manpower. They don't have armored vehicles, they don't have manpower, and it is very difficult to cross railways. It is very difficult to redeploy armored vehicles, and you will be always like under open fire, open air, and the Russians will attack you always, and you will have losses. But some sources are saying that the Ukrainians have started the accumulation of their forces on the northern part in this direction, somewhere here, significant number of forces. It's very difficult to calculate, of course, but they have increased, they have intensified the artillery clashes, they have redeployed significant number of forces in this direction, and the question is what the Ukrainians are planning to do. And if you ask my opinion, as I understand, as soon as the Ukrainians establish control over the entire western part of these railways from Bakhmut to Kurdyumovka, Gorlovka, now they are able to get some forces, free forces from this direction, and to redeploy these forces to the north, like 3rd, 5th, 80th, and many other brigades to the north in direction, let's say, Bandarная, Привилья, like Minkovka, Orekhovo, Vasilievka. And it will be much more better for the Ukrainians. It's going to be even smart from some point of view to start offensive operation from the northern flank of Artyomov by the Ukrainian forces with one purpose: to force the Russians also to step back from the western side, from the western side bank of the railways that goes from Sivers to Bakhmut. And this is going to be, of course, significant results for the Ukrainians. They understand that if they're able to complete these operations before winter comes, then they will be able to secure themselves for the next year, to get prepared before the next year, and let's say the next year to continue offensive operation. And the Russians understand this as well, because I'm not sure that it will be a very easy job for the Russians if they will be forced to step back from this bridgehead on the north of Bakhmut, let's say to Solidar, to start everything from the beginning, let's say the next summer, the next winter or something like this. The Russians understand that this bridgehead on the north of Bakhmut is the key region to start like a very powerful offensive operation that anyway sooner or later will start in direction of Slavyansk, of course, and Kramatorsk. And we can say that no matter the losses, the Russians need to save control over this bridgehead. And Ukrainians understand this as well. When talking about the south direction, this area doesn't have any value, to tell the truth. Like the front line along the railways and this situation fits both requirements and both needs, either the Russians and the Ukrainians. But when talking about the northern flank, this is a very important bridgehead for the Russians. They can't risk, they can't leave this territory. The Russians understand this well, and I believe that the early and the middle and late autumn campaign is going to be about the clashes on the northern flank of Bakhmut. For the Ukrainians, this is the vital question. to force the Russians to step back in direction of Solidar, let's say, and in direction, let's say, of Krasnaya, Bakhmut, and so on, and to restore control at least over this part of this foothold. Now we are moving further to Kupiansk and Liman front lines, and for example, when talking about Liman area, the Ukrainians during the previous week lost 450 soldiers, and during this week 400 soldiers. Another area where the level of loss of the Ukrainians have been reduced in comparison with the previous week. One more time, I have just the same question: whether it's just the situation with like the less activities on the combat lines, or the Ukrainians somehow managed to improve their skills and found some solution how to reduce their losses. And this is very important because, one more time, two different situations that leads to completely two different like development of the entire global scope of the special military operation. When talking about Kupiansk direction, the Russians reported that as a result of clashes, very fierce battles in the vicinity of Novoselovka, Pischane, Glushevka, the Ukrainians 25th Brigade lost its combat capabilities and probably also will be removed from the combat line to restore their like power, their manpower, the number of forces, and so on. So by this week, the Ukrainians lost two very powerful brigades, 25th Brigade and 82nd in Zaporizhzhia direction. When talking about 82nd, this brigade is from strategical reserves, and 25th is the very old Ukrainian army, let's say old Ukrainian army. Anyway, both these brigades are very powerful, very experienced, and this is very big losses for the Ukrainians. When talking about the losses and comparing this, the situation is almost the same. The last week, the Ukrainians lost 400 soldiers, and this week, 400 soldiers, and the last one, 425. Also, the level of losses have been reduced for another 5%. So we'll see, but it's very difficult to make some conclusions just based on 2 weeks. We need to wait another one, and when we have at least the numbers for 3 weeks, we will be able to make real conclusions and to understand what is going on, what is happening, and how the situation is going to be developed in the future. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds you to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.